Alright, team, so we're back, of course, talking about some Final Fantasy VII Remake, and we're back with a topic that I didn't know we'd be revisiting. I did a video talking about Remake Part 2 and the possibility of a demo in, August 2020, so we're not super far off from that video being 2 years ago. This video is relatively impromptu. It's not what I was planning on putting out today, but I've seen something on Reddit that I thought like talking about or discussing on the channel. Of course, it's from Reddit. I live and breathe on that Reddit, on that subreddit, even though I'm goddamn banned from it and never got a reason why. Fuckers. So essentially what we have here is a cross-post that somebody did on the Remake subreddit from the PlayStation subreddit about the new system they got for PlayStation Plus, the kind of Game Pass equivalent, but with the highest tier for PlayStation Plus, you get access to game trials, which has some people worried kind of going forward if demos and things like that for games are going to be behind a paywall. Like, you have to pay for this highest tier PlayStation Plus to be able to demo a game. Now, before we get into it, I've seen the discussion of the differences between a trial and a demo, and it's supposed to be that a trial is like the full game, but you can only play so much of it at a time, and the data from your trial of the game will carry over to the full game if you happen to get it, whereas a demo is just like a set portion of the game, and obviously nothing's supposed to carry over. But that's not entirely true. For one, with Fallout 76 back in the day, I played the demo, the beta, the goddamn stress test for that shit, and all that stuff carried over to the full game, but also with Stranger of Paradise, they have a demo for that, the most recent demo, in fact, that I did a review for on the channel, and your data carried over from that as well. So I don't think it's worth getting into the semantics, so to speak, of trying to argue demo versus trial, because we don't know what they mean anyways. Even if it does specifically say trial on the tiers thing, on the premium tier, we don't know if they actually mean just trial versions of game, demo versions of games, or both. And without even arguing semantics, let's be honest here, a trial and demo, same goddamn thing. Now, putting that conversation aside for a minute, it's going to be subjective whether or not you think putting game trials and or demos, whatever you want to call it, behind a paywall is a good or bad thing. I personally don't like it. The point of a trial or a demo is to test out a game and see if you want to buy it, give them the $60 or whatever for the game. Now, these are just my thoughts in the more modern era where we have digital content. It's a lot easier to get access to the demos for a game. Back in the day, I did used to have magazine subscriptions, which would often come with demo discs. So technically, back then, demos were at least sometimes behind paywalls. But I also didn't pay for that back then. I was a very, very young kid. My mom paid for that. Now, why this pertains to us here on the channel is the possibility of Remake Part 2 having a demo and or trial, and that maybe being behind a paywall. Now, what is the likelihood of Remake Part 2 having a demo? It's kind of a weird conversation. We're not going to go super in-depth on it here like I did with the previous video. You can watch that one. It still stands to this day. But essentially, every numbered entry from 7 to 15 has had a demo. Now, I don't know about 6 and before because those were mostly cartridge games, so I don't know how demos would have worked back in the day with that. But from 7 to 15, they have. Even the MMOs, 11 and 14, they have trial versions and stuff like that, or free-to-play versions, whatever it is. There's ways you can test the game out before you want to buy it. And even the sequels of games, so 10-2 and the 13 trilogy, all those games had demo versions. But also something like Final Fantasy VII had multiple versions. It wasn't just the bombing mission. There was also something with Mount Corel, and there's also the battle square you could do from Gold Saucer. So the point of all this is that Square Enix really loves their demos. They've been doing them for at least 25 plus years now, maybe even before then. Stranger of Paradise, which is the most recent Final Fantasy, it was Team Ninja, but it's still a Final Fantasy game. Had multiple different ways to test it. I think there was a beta and a demo, or multiple demos, whatever it was. 16 didn't even exist in the conversation whenever I made the video back in 2020, but more than likely 16 will have some sort of a demo or a trial or something like that. So the likelihood of Part 2 having a demo is pretty goddamn high. Now, you could argue whether or not it needs it. It depends on how different the gameplay is going to be. I assume the gameplay is going to be relatively the same, but maybe team combos like Sonon and Yuffie had, but also maybe they change a little bit of other stuff to it, add some more additional things to the combat. But more than likely, it's going to be relatively the same as Part 1. So you could argue whether or not it needs it, but it'll probably still exist. Now, on the topic of Square Enix putting a Remake Part 2 demo behind a paywall, that's another kind of weird, kind of hard conversation. Because on paper, you think they wouldn't do that. That would make the least sense. But also, Square Enix is all about trying out new monetization practices. We've already seen them talk about multiple times wanting to do NFTs and goddamn blockchain gaming. And they've already saturated the mobile market with all kinds of different games. So if you say to me, David, do you think that they're going to put a demo behind a paywall? I wouldn't say it's off the table. Now, the top tier PS Plus thing is only $18 a month, at least in the US or whatever. So it's not really that much. Now, would I buy this? As a consumer, probably not. As a content creator, yeah, I'd probably make a one-time purchase, get PS Plus for 1 month, download the Remake Part 2 demo just so I could play it, talk about it, review it, and discuss it on my channel, of course. But if I was just a consumer, if I wasn't doing YouTube or content creation, I'd just wait. If that ends up being the case, I would just wait. Now, on the topic of a Remake Part 2 demo, what would that be? It's really hard to say. Back in 2020, I kind of brought up the Battle Square Mount Corel demos that existed with the original game. Maybe they would do those again. Kind of replicate that, since those are areas that would probably be in Part 2. But in hindsight now, I don't know that they would. My first instinct besides those would be something with the Calm Flashback, but I don't know how you do that without spoiling like the important shit for the remake story. Not even just the original FF7's calm flashback, just in general, the remake story. There's got to be differences with the calm flashback, but also major revelations for the remake story. So I don't know that they would do that. They could do it and edit stuff out, because even the demo for Remake Part 1 was the bombing mission, but they edited out the cutscene where Cloud remembers Tifa and Nibelheim as a kid, right? So they could do the calm flashback at the beginning of Part 2 for a demo, but edit certain things out that are important. And I only mention the calm flashback because it should be the beginning of Part 2, similar to how the bomb mission was the beginning of Part 1. But putting that aside, the point of a demo is to kind of get across your game and get people to want to buy it. So more than likely what they could do is maybe the area outside of Calm, which should be this explorable, pseudo-open world kind of area, a lot bigger of an area to explore than what Part 1 offered, so that maybe you can go from outside of Calm all the way to like the Mithril Mine, explore the whole area, fight a bunch of monsters, and maybe you fight the Midgar Zolom as like a boss at the end of the demo, and then it ends, and that kind of gets you hyped for the game. Something like that could work too. But of course, those are just my thoughts on the topic. I'll pass it off to you guys. So the possibility of demos/trials being behind paywalls, what are your thoughts on this? I know most people are going to be getting it for the Game Pass equivalent, right? There's going to be a bunch of games you get for a certain amount of money a month, and everything else is really just a bonus. But at the end of the day, you're still having to pay money to test out a game before you want to buy it. So what are your thoughts on that? And do you think that Part 2 is going to have a demo, and do you think it's going to be a part of this? I think you have to essentially pay money to demo Part 2. Also, let's assume that Part 2 is going to have a demo. What do you think it's going to be? Like, what part of the World of Gaia or the story for Final Fantasy VII do you think they would have us demo for Part 2? Anyways, dudes, that's the video. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Give a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are interested in more Final Fantasy VII Remake content. Turn on notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @DaveYT. I'm on Discord. Links to my networks are in the description. In the outro. Later, guys.
Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect. We spend it with no shame. We blow that like Coltrane. We in here like Rogaine, or leave it like Cobain.